Okay, we're going to be speaking about SIBO today. Wanted to give a quick introduction on my background so you know who is speaking to you. I have my bacteriology BS from Moscow, Idaho, my microbiology honors from Glasgow, Scotland, and my microbiology first job was in Stockholm, Sweden with Pharmacia Diagnostics. Then I gained my certified clinical nutritionist, and you'll see some D's in my bio here. That's for the extended version, but just know that defining moments in our life, typically crises, seem to always start with D's. So, and it's the same with our gut, so I will explain that as well. I then got my traditional naturopathic doctorate and transitioned after that to nutraceutical sales. After 30 years in Texas, I moved to Idaho to be an organic farmer and rancher, but discovered that they are triple spraying herbicides on the farmland on 3 sides of our property, that 8 out of 10 of our neighbors have cancer. We've lost a couple already. That posed me or encouraged me to start looking into the soil microbiome for answers, and that's how I found Microbiome Labs. I attended a public lecture in the closest town to us, and a physician said publicly, Roundup is so safe, you can coat your tongue with it. So I spoke up, and I think it was coincidentally 9 days later, the forest on the other side of our property was aerial sprayed with herbicide and roped off with signs saying not to enter after a couple months. Everyone I know, especially when I go to trade shows, a lot of the practitioners that I've met have gut problems. So I have established that if I do nothing and I say nothing, then I'm part of the problem. So I am available to all of those who want to be part of the solution, because I believe as a country, our microbiome is under assault and we really need to address it. So when we look into our microbiome, the problems that we see start with D's: dysbiosis, dysfunction of the immune system, lack of diversity, disruption and destruction of the mucin 2 layers, and dyspepsia. So as I'm doing these different Zoom meetings, we talk about different aspects of this problem. Today, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about SIBO. And we're hearing a lot about SIBO these days. So let's discuss it. What I plan to cover are the diagnostic indications, cause, mechanism of cause, the complications, suggestions, and going over some questions. So what are the indications of SIBO? The number one thing that people are complaining about, I would say, is the bloating. And this is a 5 to 10 minutes after bloating. So we know that it's not time enough for bacteria to ferment the food and cause gas, or that it's not the gas that's causing the bloating. So we believe it's the inflammation, and that the inflammation is starting as soon as the food hits the mouth. So the kind of the oral amylase alert. And there is associated pain, reduced absorption of nutrients, fatigue, malaise, and yes, also some gas, but again, not the primary cause or associated symptom. You can test for SIBO with breath tests, lactulose tests, stool tests, but they're only about 50% accurate. The most accurate is the aspiration test, but it's also the most invasive. So we believe the best way to really come up with a diagnosis is to take history, symptoms, their story, and your gut intuition as a functional practitioner and do a differential diagnosis. Okay, the causes. One of the big causes are the pharmaceutical drugs, the proton pump inhibitors, birth control pills, hormones, steroids, antibiotics. And basically these drugs are going to cause motility. And that's really the underlying problem, is the lack of motility. They're also going to cause gallbladder issues, bile reduction, and or damage of the mucus layers. Another cause are infections. This can be food poisoning. This can be other travelers type of diseases, and digestive diseases and their associated drugs, such as Crohn's, diverticulitis, can be some of the kind of black box syndromes, the chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, diabetes, scleroderma, a lot of the autoimmune diseases, and the drugs that are being treated, because those drugs, again, slow the motility. We know that diet attributes to SIBO, and this is going to be your high sugar, high carb, high alcohol, low diversity in your diet, which then translates to low diversity of your microbiome. Also, lifestyle contributes to low gut motility by being too stressed or too sedentary. So here's the list of other drugs that you might not have thought about that cause and disrupt motility. So you've got your anticholinergic medications, and these are going to be your allergy meds, tricyclic antidepressants, levodopa. Again, this is a neurotransmitter endocrine association, beta androgenic agonists, and the opioids. And we know the opioid addiction is very widespread, so we're going to see a lot of motility issues with that. Some of them you might not have thought about are testosterone pellets. Again, they cause iron retention and then subsequently constipation. Also diuretics, because they're leaching minerals from the body, and chronic mineral imbalances can lead to poor motility. Okay, so we said, how is SIBO caused? It's by the reduction of bacterial diversity due to reduced motility that's caused by the drugs, the diet, the disease, and the lifestyle problems. So when we alter diversity, what we're doing is changing bacteria richness, and these are the types, the different types of bacteria, or the quantity, and the uniformity, which are the types as the quality, or specific types in a location. So you're basically getting the wrong organisms in the wrong place and the right organisms in the wrong place. We're also looking at the altered environment. When you're changing the pH, you're changing the bacterial zip codes. This is how they know where to live, their zip codes of their location. So you look at motility, lack of motility, as you've got transient bacteria that are coming into your neighborhood and they're creating a bunch of trash. They're dumping their feces on your lawn. They're taking too many resources, and they're destroying your home. So that's what lack of motility is doing in your gut. Also, decreased bile salts and enzymes. There are certain bacteria that will eat your bile salts, and you won't be able to digest your food properly, and then that will compound the motility problem. So let's look at these zip codes. You can see, starting at the stomach, you're going to have a very low pH, and then you're going to dump a lot of bicarbonates here into the small intestine, and then you'll have a somewhat neutral environment. And then as you go into the colon, you're going to have, again, an acidic environment, and then more neutral as it exits the anus. So what are these bacteria living in these different zip codes? Here's a nice chart. You can see lactobacillus likes acid, both in the stomach area as well as the colon. And that makes sense. Think of the most common lactobacillus is acidophilus. So that gives you a clue. Some other names to pay attention to are Bacteroides. As you can see, like kind of a more neutral to acid environment here. And I've got a great link here. You'll have access to these slides, but be sure and click on this link. I've already opened it up here so that you can see who's the predominant as far as numbers in the digestive tract, you've got those Bacteroides that we pointed out that make up about a third of your intestinal microbiota. Then you see the Firmicutes make up another third, and then another subspecies that it's important to pay attention to is this verruco microbiota, this orange, and that's where the Akkermansia, which is one of our important keystone strains, the family that they belong to, are Faecalibacterium in the Firmicutes, and then of course your bifidobacteria. Those are three extremely important ones, and this gives you an idea of how populous they are in the intestinal tract and a little bit where they like to reside. Okay, so when we talked about what's going to perturb the digestive tract, the change of pH because of the lack of motility, the change in bile salts because of bacteria that are consuming them, damage to the gut mucosa, which is going to cause, as you know, a lot of lipopolysaccharide shedding from the bacterial cell wall. And that's going to change the diversity of these organisms to a more pathogenic variety. So let's look at, when you use antibiotics, kind of an example of how this works and how they wipe out everything, but they selectively allow the pathogens to grow back, and that changes the pH and the environment. So you're going to get, your staph, your strep, your salmonella, and your C. difficile. This is pointing out that some of your enterohemorrhagic E. coli can be more or less virulent by your diet and how you're eating. Again, changes the pH. And this gives you an example of how you can start off with a primary infection, such as chronic rhinosinusitis, treat it with antibiotics, cause a GI distress, it develops into a SIBO, then it creates a gluten intolerance, and then on your birthday, you go out and consume a lot of sugar and gluten, and you end up with an extreme case of acne, and then you're going to go with a steroid or another antibiotic and start perpetuating the cycle. So this is how a primary infection can be exacerbated by a secondary or a tertiary. And another example, say using a big ag, is that glyphosate works much like an antibiotic in your gut. So, with the exposure to glyphosate, whether they're aerial spraying the forest behind your house or triple spraying the crops around your house, then when you consume this glyphosate-resistant wheat, that can cause some digestive issues, and then that develops into a SIBO, which can create a huge deficiency in vitamin K2. When without vitamin K2, you get calciphylaxis, which is going to the hardening of the arteries and can lead to all sorts of cardiovascular, kidney stones, even plaquing in the brain. So what can we do? We certainly need to reduce the risks of these infections, looking at functional medicine to have alternate approaches instead of drugs and antibiotics. And we can do this by focusing on improving and maintaining the microbiome diversity, improving the mucosa and the gut motility, increasing the secretory IgA, and increasing the Tregs of the immune system and overall immune function. So we improve microbiome diversity, importantly by, besides avoiding the pharmaceutical drugs, but also improve the diversity of your diet. The microbiome likes when you consume complex carbs and tubers, roots and tubers. Utilize the spores for competitive exclusion and gut reconditioning. intermittent fasting. We mentioned the Akkermansia, which was part of a primary keystone subset of organisms, and they like to grow when you're not eating. So, and it's a fat-burning organism, so it's important to make sure that you are practicing intermittent fasting. And we recommend for the most inflamed gut to eat during an 8-hour period and fast during a 16. Do not consume glyphosate or Roundup herbicides or GMO, genetically engineered foods. Then we recommend improving the mucosa and the gut motility. You can do this by increasing certain amino acids. There are certain amino acids, such as threonine, serine, proline, and cysteine, that increase the goblet cells' production of mucin 2. You can do this by increasing insoluble dietary fibers, and there's a list here. The one we produce is in our prebiotic is a kiwi fiber primarily. You can increase exercise and prokinetic herbs. Licorice, artichoke, ginger, garlic, magnesium, and all of those help improve bile function, motility, and parasympathetic activation, as well as by consuming vitamin K2. It's going to help with motility in the gut. You can increase butyrate. And the best way to do that is increasing the keystone strain bacteria that produce butyrate. And we know that the spore probiotics do help with that. And practicing intermittent fasting to completely cleanse the colon. And by that I mean it's increasing the time that the migrating motor complex is able to complete its cycle through the colon. Increase secretory IgA. You can do this with immunoglobulin support, such as the IgG 2000 that has IgG, M, A, and D. Working on stress, mindful exercise, prayer, movement, meditation, massage, and other things. Increase, moderate exercise. Increase the intake of choline, vitamin C, zinc, beta-glucans, protein, omega-3 fatty acids. All of those are good. And we've pointed out in our other lectures, omegas help decrease inflammation. Coconut oil, when you have a leaky gut, increases lipopolysaccharide and inflammation. So it's not a good idea while you're healing your gut. Wait till your gut is healed, and then all of the benefits of, you can benefit from all of the coconut oil. More exposure to environmental microbes. Again, we're developing our immune system. It needs to have exposure. So living in a sterile environment is not a good idea. So increase Treg and overall immune function. We do this, again, our GALT is the primary headquarters of our immune system. Spores help with diversity, which help with the development of our immune system. Specific amino acids to help improve the gut mucosa and motility. Specific oligosaccharides in those prebiotic fibers improve diversity. Specific immunoglobulins modulate IgA. Specific herbs to increase muscle kinetics. Vitamin K2 to increase the parasympathetic activation of the muscles and the macrophages. Increase the butyrate by helping the diversity of the keystone strains. Another things that will help is vitamin A, DHA, curcumin, cumin seed, and of course, good sleep. So I am going to unmute everyone. We can go over some questions on the slides itself. I pulled out a few questions here just to make sure that if anyone was shy, that we would have some ready. Okay, so I'm going to go through these questions, and then if there's any additional, just let me know. So I've been asked in the past, do parasites cause SIBO, and should they all be eradicated? It's possible. Yes, some may cause it, but no, we shouldn't go, whoops, I see a misspelling. We shouldn't eradicate all the parasites. There are some parasites that are normal commensals and have a symbiotic relationship. And we believe that's the same is true with H. pylori, that it should not be overgrowing to cause a problem, but we shouldn't look to wipe it all out because it is part of the normal flora. Another question was, why is L-glutamine not included in the megamucosa? And this is the same is true with the other amino acids I mentioned. They do require bacterial synthesis, and that's why we recommend start with megaspore to jumpstart the keystone strains and the diversity, and then add the amino acids in the megamucosa so that they are there to break them down. But what is different about the L-glutamine is that without that bacterial synthesis, it can produce some neurotoxic metabolites, and also its primary purpose is feeding the microvilli cells, which we believe if we can restore that mucin layer 2, those microvilli will be protected. And that should be done first, and then that diversity needs to be there, and then L-glutamine should be fine to introduce. But we just wanted specific amino acids that are working on the mucin 2 and have the bacteria populations there restored. That was the first priority. Can bacteria cause dysbiosis? Dysbiosis cause or consume the bile salts and cause diarrhea? And the answer to that is yes. And I think sometimes, when I get asked all the time, what's causing diarrhea or what's causing constipation. I think it's important to know what are all the different reasons. Okay, and I had one more slide on questions. What else does pH help? And we recognized how important the different pHs are throughout the digestive tract, but they are more than just zip codes for bacteria. They also help with enzymatic reactions and bacterial metabolic processes. Every enzyme must have a certain temperature pH in the presence of specific metallic ions, such as magnesium, selenium, manganese, and copper. I often get asked, will fecal transplants be the answer? Whether it's SIBO or autism, and the answer is, well, temporarily, yes. We have seen that, but long-term, no, because the unique fingerprint of your microbiome will revert in time. Okay, and then I did want to point out there are more questions that I have posted on the Microbiome University. For each presentation, I've listed a series of questions, as well as on the tab on that spreadsheet, the answers, plus the links to all the presentations. And we've done several presentations on total gut restoration, MegaGuard, different questions about the microbiome lab products, K2, myth-busting probiotics, and then I will post today's recording on presentation 9 on that answer page by the SIBO. And then you can see there are other questions here. I think most of them were covered in the presentation, but if not, please let me know. Okay. I'll give you the floor now.
Can you hear me?
And I can.
Okay. The only question I have is, earlier you said something about the clicking on the link to get to the slides. I don't see where I can do that in my current frame.
Okay, let me see if it's on the questions side. It is. So, whoops. Let me go to the right presentation. Okay, so I'm going to copy it on both the questions and the answers. Right now it's on the questions, and I'm copying it now. It's presentation 9, PPT slides. It'll be both on the questions and the answers tabs.
Okay. All right, very good. No, it's good stuff.
Good.
Got you. Okay.
Good, good. So were you familiar with most of those concepts already?
Yes. The only thing I mean, I
Okay.
wrote down several things, but the one thing I wasn't sure about, and it's not that big of a deal, but birth controls you said would cause overgrowth. And I'm curious as to what is it about the birth control pills that might cause SIBO?
Yes, and there's an excellent podcast that I found it on YouTube with Kiran Krishnan and a physician. She was in Paris, and she was a hormone. She had an MD, but she's a hormone specialist, and I think she's written a book about what birth controls. But basically, it's changing the entire microbiome. I think she mentioned from not only the uterus, but the gut, the entire digestive tract. So that I listed that based on her presentation, and I can send you a link to her presentation right after this, because I too was not really familiar with how much damage birth control pills are doing.
Well, I knew they depleted B6 and some other micronutrients, but I wasn't aware that they could alter the diversity.
Yeah.
The other thing I had.
We know that a lot of these.
No, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say a lot of these bacteria actually produce hormones and neurotransmitters. So maybe it's, yeah. So I think maybe there's a conflict. Maybe that's part of it. Is they're affecting those bacteria.
Okay. All right. So it's an indirect, is what that would be, I guess. But anyway, something else you mentioned was IgG 2000, I think you said?
Yes.
And is that a microbiome product?
It is. It's not, I mean, this product has been in our industry a long time. IgG 2000, it's the same serum-derived immunoglobulins that launched the companies Numedica and Zymogen in the day. And then they went to a colostrum, but now we have that contract, and this is a very successful, it's a well-established product in our market.
And why is it better than a colostrum product?
Because it's more concentrated. You're going to get 45% more of these immunoglobulins without all of the milk aspects of colostrum.
Okay. Okay. And I'm looking at the slide right now. I don't remember IgD. Maybe I need my physiology and biochemistry back. IgD?
Yes, and I looked that up as well. Let's see, I put it on the answer to one of these. And it only makes up 0.25% of all of our immunoglobulins.
Oh, that's why I don't remember. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So it's on presentation 2. Let me look and see how the question was phrased on number 9. Yeah.
Ballpark, what does it do?
Let's see.
Oh, never mind. I can look it up. I can go back and look at the presentation. Not a big deal.
Yeah, I thought I just put the percent in there, but I didn't indicate what its specific function was. So I'll have to look that up again too. Good question.
0.25%.
Very insignificant. Yes.
I mean, that's silly. Why even bother?
Okay. Exactly.
Okay, great. No, that's it. That's all the questions I had.
Since they list, well, so I was going to tell you that the IgG 2000 is in a powder form in the megamucosa, as well as we have it in a standalone capsule form.
Okay.
So what we use it for is for anyone who's having die-off reactions, and that is any intolerance to megaspore. You can add that IgG 2000 capsule right up front when you're titrating megaspore to help soak up that lipopolysaccharide that's the primary culprit for most die-off.
I'm actually unfamiliar with that because and I don't know how long I've been using Megaspore, 2, 3, 4 years, something like that. I've never had anybody
Mm-hmm.
complain about an intolerance. Is that
Wow.
something common?
Um, it seems maybe it's different parts of the country, but we have several individuals. They will try to even take a half a capsule, and some of them will be able to do it then, but then some of them can't even take a pinch of the Megaspore. So we usually direct them to go to the one spore product we have, which is the HU58, or the two spore probiotic, which is Restore Flora, and then graduate up to Megaspore. So many people, I know my husband had one who was a diverticulitis, and she started and stopped with Megaspore multiple times. I mean, she's doing fine now. If they're persistent and they stay with it, there's always a good outcome. But some of them just are not persistent. So we have to give them a different protocol with a fewer number of spores to be able to tolerate the spore titration.
So I'm curious about this, and it may not be part of this conversation. I don't want to, am I the only one on? I don't want to bother or hog the presentation.
Oh, you're not hogging anything? I can go ahead and, if you want to say something off the recording, I can go ahead and stop that. Okay.